Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost. It's Friday. It's 5:30 Eastern time, and it's our community gathering. Uh, by the way, I always forget to remind you that if you want to actually be with us in the room itself, rather than see us on YouTube or hear us on a podcast later on, you can always email me at trunltd@aol.com, trunltd@aol.com. We'll put you on the list and we'll invite you every week and come when you can. Um, Always looking to meet new people. So we've been doing this for a while. I think I think it's my 133rd or 134th consecutive week of doing conversations with people in the
Wow.
industry. We started this. Everything that I've done, I've been running True for 29 years. So I mean, everybody like goes 29 years. How come I never heard of you? I don't know. I don't know. We've been doing it 29 years. So and it's always been about community, but it's also been about providing useful information and getting interesting people in a room so that they can talk to the rest of us. Who some of us are also interesting, admittedly, but we've been doing this for quite a while now, and we're a producers organization. If you don't actually know that, we are here basically to nurture and develop producers and to try to share information about the business itself with artists as well. Basically, after years and years of having artists moan and groan about having gotten into a terrible agreement with somebody, a bad contract. There's no such thing as a bad contract. It's just bad choices. So we teach you to actually understand a little bit more about what you're signing when you sign these things and how the business works in general. So we invite people to come and be part of True. We also invite people to come and support what we do. We basically make this room here free for anybody who wants to come for free. It's pay what you can. Sometimes pay what you can is nothing, and sometimes we hope pay what you can is something. We're going live again, so it's going to be costing us a lot more money to keep running. So if anybody wants to support us, go to trudonate.com, trudonate.com. So the conversation started April 17th, 2020. Anybody remember April 17th, 2020? Anybody remember March 15th, April 2020? That was back when COVID hit and we all went into shutdown, and we were all learning what quarantine really meant. It was like a word that was like theoretical at best for many of us, but we were in a real quarantine, and we actually shut our doors and went into our apartments and didn't come out. So that was kind of hard for a lot of us. That was particularly for people in theater and people in the arts, sensitive souls that we are. I'm sure it's just as hard for everybody else, but for us, it was a sense of being really isolated and out of touch with our community. So I got myself a Zoom account and I opened up a Zoom room, and people come and they spend time with us on Fridays at 5:30 Eastern time. And it's quite a community. I mean, if you were here at the beginning, you would have heard a lot of people introducing themselves and telling you what they're up to. Everybody's up to something. People are all active and engaged in this community. And if you want to be inspired, come to the room and be with us. Conversations have been about being in isolation, being creative during COVID, whatever we could come up to talk about that kind of made life a little easier for all of us. We're now out of the shutdown. We're not in quarantine anymore. We're not out of the woods though. There's still COVID, and COVID is very creative. Talk about creative people. We're creative, but COVID's pretty creative too. It keeps coming up with new forms. So we're still trying to be careful, and we're still trying to be conscious of what's going on and conscious of people who might be vulnerable that we may come into contact with. But our conversations are starting to talk about going live and going into live performance. We did a town hall a couple nights ago, Tuesday night, which is really focusing on the challenges of coming back into live performance. Today, we're going to have a couple guests who created a business that was the ideal COVID business, 3 years before COVID. And I'm gonna talk to them, and we're gonna talk about how they foresaw, obviously not COVID, but they foresaw a future that included virtual. Hi, this is Zoom. We're virtual, and though a lot of people are resistant to it, I think Stewart and Bonnie and BroadwayHD have come up with some interesting knowledge and understanding about how to use the virtual medium and how to make theater accessible in a medium like TV or this streaming, whatever you want to call it. We're going to talk a lot about live capture, but I'm also going to have them talk about themselves. I'm going to bring them into the room now. It's Bonnie Comley and Stewart Lane, who I consider friends. I hope that's okay.
Oh, that's great.
Okay.
Nice to hear. Thank you.
So, and they're also Broadway producers, by the way. We're not going to talk about that as much, although we're certainly going to touch on it because you're going to want to know some of that stuff. But they created something called BroadwayHD, which is a streaming service that is really geared for the theater community. And I want to talk about that journey. I want to talk about when it started and when it started taking shape for you and when it started gaining some momentum. And then what happened when we went into shutdown and how well positioned you were. How did you know? How did you know? Stewart, what you want to say hi?
Well, first of all, it's great being here. Thank you, Bob, for having us. The idea of a capture has been going on for decades. I've been producing on Broadway for over 40 years. I know I don't look that old, but
not at all. Not at all.
Thank you. I knew you were going to say that, right? But as technology evolved, there were other people who tried to monetize a live production. So first there was broadcast TV, and once in a while you'd see maybe Death of a Salesman, Billy J. Cobb on there, and then there was cable with pay-per-view, and then there was the VCR. And then there was the DVD, and then there was the CD, the Blu-ray. So you could see that technology was changing, and each decade they came up with a new process. The theater was growing in popularity from the depths of the 70s to this new golden age that we've achieved for Broadway. It's been an amazing climb where shows don't just run for a year or 5, if you're lucky. They run decades now. 25 years for Lion King, 17 years for Cats. It's an amazing industry.
And right now we can't get Phantom to close, even though it's trying.
You can't say goodbye. Can't say goodbye.
Just never can say goodbye.
So with the technology growing, with the audiences changing, getting younger, and getting a younger audience to Broadway, all of a sudden the shows start to reflect more of a younger audience than the average 45-year-old theater goer. You start
before we go more into that though, tell us a little bit about your background. I think people would love to hear it. And Bonnie, I'm going to ask you the same thing.
How much time do we have?
Two minutes for that.
Okay, I'll keep it brief and succinct. I'm one of those kids who fell in love with the theater at an early age. I saw my first Broadway show with my best friend, whose father was the star of the show. He was Sid Caesar. And we got to see Little Me, written by music by Cy Coleman, book by Neil Simon.
I saw that at the Erlanger Theater in pre-Broadway tryout in Philadelphia. I loved it.
Oh, you're kidding?
No, I loved it. I was a kid. I loved it.
Well, that's it. I mean, I was just amazed at the reaction of the live audience with the actors on stage, the give and take, and then going backstage afterwards. And there's Sid holding court with his friends, and they're laughing and backslapping, and he's got this little home away from home with a TV and a cot and a hot plate. And I said, this is great. I want this. So that was my direction. So from then on, it was strictly, middle school, the drama club, the classes, the speech classes, the acting classes when I could get them. I went to high school, was in the school plays. And along the way, you're writing, directing. I was head of the drama club. Went to Boston University, got a BFA in theater, and was able to come to New York and join Equity and SAG and AFTRA and perform on stage. I worked with back then, Van Johnson doing summer stock, or Ed Hurley doing, touring. So, and then I transitioned into producing for Broadway because one, I love the theater and I saw there were many more talented people out there than me, but I love New York and I do love the theater. So I started working as an assistant house manager at the Brooks Atkinson Theater, which is now the Lena Horne Theater, when same time next year was playing there, and then later again with Tribute with Jack Lemmon. And then they moved over to the Alvin where Annie was playing. But it was a time, and this is a lesson in life, I guess, in general, and you probably heard this, you want to buy in when nobody else wants to. I was still able to become a partner in half the Palace Theater because nobody else wanted to go near the theater back in the late 70s and the early 80s. And I was able to get in there. And even becoming a producer was not a lucrative business back then. But I loved, as I said, I loved what I was doing, and I had faith in the future of Broadway, even though theater was still considered the poor stepchild in variety. I mean, even now we're kind of thrown into the back of the magazine as the last page of what's going on in the theater, where television and film certainly take a much bigger stand there. So that was it. So I came to New York, started producing, and over the years I've won 6 Tony Awards and numerous Drama League Awards, Drama Desk Awards, and I've been lucky to make the whole process work for me.
Thanks, Stewart. Bonnie, you want to say hi and give us a little bit about your background? And you and Stewart have met before, right?
Yes. So we met about 27 years ago, something like that. So yeah, so we've been, and that's it. And then the rest is history. And the rest we heard from Stu. So yeah, my background is very different from Stu's. I never went to the theater as a kid, didn't really know anything about going to theater. The only theater I saw was when, my cousins did, or my siblings did, play in high school. That was about it. And so I really, from a family of 4 kids, we didn't go to the theater. So I wasn't, and then when I finally went, it was because I was an entertainment reporter. So I was covering theater, and I went in and I thought, this is great. Like, more people should know about this stuff. So I think the seeds of Broadway HD and of digital capture were put there from the very beginning of when I first went in to see theater, because, I'm one of those, the first shows that you see and you get the goosebumps kind of thing. And I was like, this is great. This is really, an art form. This is amazing. And so, my career has always been business and but the business end of TV, film. But I managed to get, as I said, a host and reporter job for covering entertainment news, and we did so much on theater. And then that kind of moved into doing exclusively theater when Stu and I got together, and then Broadway HD was that marrying of film, TV with theater, and then the latest in streaming technology. So Broadway HD was one of our babies that we had about we're going into our 8th year at Broadway HD now.
So 8th year, that would make it
we launched
2014.
Yeah, we launched in 2015. So we celebrated our 7th anniversary. We're going into our 8th year here. And Stu and I, as Stu mentioned before, we didn't invent digital capture. We didn't invent live capture. It's been done for 50 or 60 years. The BBC and PBS here were really the ones that sort of started that, of going in and trying to take theater and bringing it to a screen. So we didn't invent that. Stu's first encounter, I think, with live capture, digital capture, was in 1992 for the Will Rogers Follies at the Palace Theater, and Japan Satellite Broadcast came in as one of the producers of the stage version of the show for the rights to get that and take it to pay-per-view in Japan. So we've been involved with this as a team with Stu back to 1992. But about 10 years ago, we had any opportunity that we had to capture live theater and then bring it to a screen, we jumped at it because Stu and I, as you mentioned, we both produce for the stage. We both produce for Broadway. We've produced off Broadway. We've produced tours, and we produced in the West End. But every time we see something that's on a Broadway stage, we feel that that show should be seen by a wider audience, should live beyond when the curtain comes down on the final performance. So we've always believed in digital capture and sharing that and making
I want to jump in because I want to talk about why what you do is actually so special. Digital capture and film theater has been with us, I mean, since I was a kid. I remember there was I remember Katharine Hepburn in Long Day's Journey into the Night was captured. There was a whole series of things that were captured in black and white for TV back in, at one time, everybody, television was in black and white. It didn't have color. I know that's hard to imagine. Actually, what was interesting was that movement to create captured theater for TV wasn't successful. Ultimately, not that many of those pieces worked well on TV. What have you learned that makes the experience of watching a show on film, which is live caption? It's not really film, I know, but what did you learn, and how did you find ways to create an experience that could compete with the live experience to some degree?
Well,
go ahead,
okay,
Bob. No, go ahead. You first.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that this is not just simply putting a camera at the back of the house and trying to record it. That's good for the archives where the sound is poor and the lighting is poor and the quality is not there. But when we were learning how to shoot this, we would take 14 or 18 cameras, place it around the theater, including on the conductor, let's say. So not only do you have the best seat in the house, you've got all the best seats in the house.
So I want to underline this, 14 to 68, did he say 14 to 18, 14 to 60? Doesn't matter. It's more than one camera, and it's also more than the 3 cameras that most of us are able to use. A lot of us who are here to talk about live capture with you I think are looking for ways of possibly doing it themselves in an effective way. We're not going to be able to do the level that you guys do, but in the very least, everybody needs to know they have to have 3 cameras. I would say 3 cameras. What would you say?
Well, I mean, 3 for an archive purpose. I think Lincoln Center uses 3.
Yeah.
But we did like 14 cameras for She Loves Me all over the theater.
Beautiful job.
And you shoot it live during the performance. Part of the mandate of what Bonnie and I were trying to accomplish was the experience. You can't beat being in live theater. I mean, that's the experience that you cannot replace, but you can try and imitate. And that's what we do here. You hear the audience applause. You see the actors do their work on stage, and they don't cut. At the end of a heavy routine, when they're catching their breath, we don't cut to a commercial or something. You actually see the actor on stage waiting for the applause, holding for it, and really working for it. When Jane Krakowski does a split, it's not like they yell cut and move on to something else. She did that 8 times a week. She would do this amazing, acrobatics with the ballet, and it's fantastic. And you really gain a real appreciation for the art form. And the efforts that go into it. So that's part of it. We did create a new art form here because it's not television and it's not a film. It's a live capture of an experience, really. Bon?
Well, what I was going to say is that, not to contradict you, Bob, but I do feel that there aren't any mistakes that were made. I forget what your term was, that, in starting off, that some of them weren't successful. I consider any professional production that was captured on film or digital or tape to be a success. I think that you can't, there's no one label for everything. And I think that with all of the multi-hyphenates that you have here in your community here at True, the advice that we give it's never a one size fits all. It's, the same way with, a film or a movie. You can't just say all movies that were done with one camera are terrible, because people have done movies with their phone, right? And they're pretty good. So I think everything has to be judged on its own of the time that it was done in, the budget that it was done on, what they're capturing on stage. I think to be really clear about what we do at Broadway HD, we are, as you said, a streaming platform. We have over 350 full-length stage plays and musicals. Our goal is, and our core content is to have Broadway captures. And what's the difference between a capture and a film? Is a capture is we go in with cameras, whether it's 3 to 18, and we capture what's going on the stage. So ideally, it's a Broadway show. Ideally, it's in front of a live audience, and ideally, it's with HD camera technology or whatever the next iteration is in newer technology. So I think that that is a very different level than what a lot of the people that are in the community here tonight are going to be able to do. But I do think that there are things that are still the same. There's certain things that are going to remain the same with what we do at Broadway HD and what people do that have a much more limited budget or a show. And I think that, with our streaming technology, so with Broadway HD, there's really, and with all of these things, that one of the things that's going to translate to all of you, there's 3 different levels of technology and 3 different levels of quality control when you're doing these a live capture or a digital capture. And the first layer of quality is the production itself. That's, are you doing a 36-member cast production on Broadway, or is it a 2-person actors in a theater, or is it 6 people doing a Zoom thing? So that's the first level, is what are we looking at? What is the story? And what are the production levels of that? The costumes, the sets, the lightings, all of that. That's all going to be the same. That's the first level. The second level is with the technology in the cameras that you're capturing it. So are you using 1 cell phone, or are you using 18 HD cameras? And then the third level of technology that is layered in, this third level of quality control, is the platform that you are streaming off of. So are you doing it off of a website that you have? Is it off of Facebook? Or with Broadway HD, we stream off of our platform. So those are the levels of quality, the show itself, the capture, the TV equipment that you're using, and then what you're streaming off of. So I think that is going to be the same for all of us, but it's what where you are in that project and what you have to be able to, the resources that you have, how that's going to translate and what that's going to look like. But
Scott in the room says, I love that Bonnie gets my limitations. So
yes, because we all have limitations. Even when you're talking about a Broadway show, if you talk to and why Stu and I feel like every single Broadway show deserves a Broadway HD capture is because there are 13 unions that are on Broadway, and that gives you a guarantee of a certain level of production. So everybody that's in those Broadway shows and everybody that's involved with creating those shows, there's a certain guarantee of level of quality. The actors are at the absolute top of their game, the sets, the costumes, the lighting, the sound, everything is there. You might not like the story, or you wish somebody else was in the cast, but you can't argue with the production values. So we just feel like when it gets to that level, it deserves a capture. And that's why when if you're trying to do something that's not your own property, the IP, the intellectual property, if you're trying to live stream an existing show, that a lot of pushback is given from the rights holders of that intellectual property, because they don't want the production values to be less than a Broadway production. So that's why with these off-Broadway or off-offs, but in the pandemic, they made concessions, right? They allowed live streaming of these shows that would never have allowed a camera in the theater at another time. Most of those have been taken back the concessions. So you still have to look at it. And let's be very clear too with the terminology around this. There is, so streaming is really just the term that, it's a very broad term that means that some sort of data, audio, or video is transmitted basically on the internet, right? So that's the streaming. Then you have live streaming, which is that audio, data, or video, or all of the above, is streaming at the same time that it's happening. That's live streaming. And then there's the capture part, which is the recorded part, which is, that's what you allows Broadway HD to do later. When we launched, we really felt that the live streaming, the live streaming was really what so much of our business was going to be about. That people wanted to see that show live at 8 o'clock at night, from a Broadway theater. But what we found after 7 years is that for our subscribers and our audience, they really wanted access to that show. They didn't necessarily need it to be live at 8 o'clock at night. In fact, we found the opposite to be true, that people are watching, they're streaming stuff at breakfast or, at lunch or on a, Saturday morning kind of thing, instead of it being 8 o'clock at night. So the terminology of, is it a live stream or is it a captured stream? There's also, and two, one of my pet peeves, my things that I try to communicate constantly with everybody. For the people that I heard, there were producers and actors that are here. Everything when you do these things, whether it's the stage part, the stage production, or with the streaming part of it, or a capture part of it, it all begins and ends with the rights and the authorization that you have the permission and the rights to do whatever it is you're pointing a camera at.
In some ways, that's your biggest challenge.
Yes, it is. It is, because, as I said, a lot of people, in the pandemic, so many theater companies thought, well, people can't get here, so we're still able to bubble our actors, and we're going to be able to bring cameras in and do this show. But just because you have the rights to do a stage production does not mean that you have the rights to bring in a camera and record it, even to show it to a producer or a potential investor, or that you have the rights to show it anywhere. So, if it's not something that you yourself wrote, you've got to be very clear and very certain that you have the rights to it. And the live streaming is a different set of rights than the on-demand rights, which means that recorded piece that is shown when it's not live. Those are very different rights, and those are all to be negotiated. And Stu and I are both, we as we said, we both act, we've both produced, we've both written things. So we're, multi-hyphenates as well. And the unions are not against what we're doing. In fact, they are very much in favor of the type of capture that Broadway HD does, because we are doing authorized captures or authorized live streaming of shows. And authorized means you have everyone, all of these 13 unions, plus the other unions that are there's 4 more layered in, that are the DGA, which is the Directors Guild, SAG-AFTRA, once these actors go on to a tape or a film, so you have to have all of that. And the unions aren't against it, because for years, people have brought video cameras or cell phones in.
I want to pull a couple things out of what you said. First of all, I want to draw a distinction so that people understand. This may be stating the obvious, but I just want to have it stated. One of the things that we've learned in COVID was we've learned that we can do things, interesting things with virtual, putting our shows on virtually. One of the things that we've learned is that requires a different kind of thinking process, which is thinking in film. So when we are doing virtual performances, some of us at least are thinking in terms of shot setups. So we have somebody who functions really as the director of photography, and we're thinking about post-production editing. What you're talking about in live capture, which I think everybody understands, but I just want to state it anyway. You're basically talking about you're not doing shots, but you are in a sense, because you're setting up enough cameras that you're going to have enough angles. So one of the biggest elements that I thought was involved, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is the choices that are made post-production of which shots to use and when. And
Well,
so
the
you have
director-
somebody, you don't have the camera setups like you would have if you're doing scenes. If you're doing,
Right.
okay, this scene takes place here and this scene takes place, you're capturing the whole thing on the stage, but you have enough camera angles and shots that you have a vast wealth of possibilities to choose from.
Right.
So
The capture director will set up get a scratch tape, so he gets a whole sense of what the whole show looks like, and then set up the cameras around the theater so they're set. Now we will shoot 2 performances, and they'll move the cameras around, and sometimes we'll actually use cranes with the cameras now. In fact, the last show we shot when we did Mr. Saturday Night with Billy Crystal, we didn't have to do pickup shots or do anything like that on an extra performance. We were able to do it all within the 2.
explain pickup shots for them.
Yeah, what's that?
Explain pickup shots.
Oh, so once you've actually shot the show, and you've got you've got different scenes you could take, you want to be able to maybe give a different point of view. So you'll do POV shots, point of view shots from one actor to another, or maybe you'll get a different angle. It'll allow us to capture close-ups that we weren't able to do during the audience participation. So it kind of enhances that, and that's all part of this new art form that we have. Because we improve on the lighting, we'll improve on the sound. This is not a camera at a microphone at the back of the theater. This is plugged into the soundboard, so we're getting it firsthand.
One thing that I'm not sure I understand is, traditionally we're all told that the reason why we can't shoot an effective version of one of our plays with 1 or 3 cameras is that stage lighting is different from film lighting. How do you compensate for that, since you're doing it off of the stage lighting? Are there any problems that are involved in that, or are there adjustments that you make?
Well, there are definitely adjustments that we make. Same thing with the mic. If you actually see the microphone on their forehead in one shot, we might want to use a different one. But the sound and the lighting can be adjusted.
So for the performance, like Eric Soretta is saying he saw one of the nights that you shot Mr. Saturday Night. How did that affect the performance? How did you coming in with those cameras? You're saying that you had the tech people make some adjustments to the lighting, or
Yes,
you did
for the lighting. But
how did that happen?
The idea, but we don't want to change the performance. Part of the fun of what we're doing is actually capturing the performance. I don't want them playing to the camera. I want them playing to the second balcony like they always do, because that's.
But they have to be lit for a way that's acceptable for film, or that's effective for film.
Yes.
And that is definitely different from what stage lighting itself would normally be.
Yes. Definitely.
So when you're planning a live capture of a Broadway show like Mr. Saturday Night, you come in and you have conversations with the lighting designer and who else?
The director, the lighting designer, and the sound designer. We're trying to keep the integrity of the intention of the original show intact as well. So the directors are getting on the same page, and the designers are more than happy to share, what they have to make the adjustments to make the digital capture successful.
Okay. By the way, Owen and Jay, if you see questions, you can always come into the room and say there's a question. Okay, I'm looking. I see a lot of questions already in the chat. Well, not a lot, but I see 3 or 4. Do we want to go to questions now, guys, or was there more that you wanted to complete?
Whatever works for everybody.
Well, it's.
Well, I'll say one other thing. Bonnie sort of mentioned this. New York is really a certain kind of audience. It's not an audience that is the same audience you're going to get in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or in Cincinnati. And so certain shows that might play well in Texas or Florida, maybe don't play as well to a New York audience. And by being with Broadway HD, we now give access to underserved plays and shows that deserve a wider audience. There was an off-Broadway show we have called Space Dogs two guys, amazing what they do. They wrote, it's based on Laika, the Russian dog that was sent into space in the late 1950s. And it's, multimedia, it's puppetry, it's singing, it's rock. It's an exciting piece. And it was only ran off Broadway and now it's gone, except for Broadway HD. It's really worth seeing. I recommend that. But it's that kind of thing that we're able to give theater, make it accessible and affordable to a much wider audience. And as Bonnie also said, this is the cream of the crop. This is New York talent. They come here with the best designers, the best actors, the composers, the lyricists. They come to New York.
A couple questions are coming up, but I want to start with the 14 cameras. Let's just say it's 14 cameras. All 14 they're placed strategically based on how your director of photography, or you had a different name for him, but how your director of photography feels he's already familiarized himself with the show, so he's actually watching and he's thinking, oh, I want to catch this from that angle, I want to catch this from now. And I know you also said that you don't always do it, but you've actually had you don't always think it's necessary, but you've actually had some aerial shots where people have actually created aerial shots, and I know that's a thing that you haven't. We had a conversation about this, but so how long a process is it to take all of those different films and put them together in an editing? How long does the editing take after something like this?
Well, our shoots are done with a live switcher, which means they're shot and recorded as if it was a live show. So the scratch tape that Stu mentioned is also approved and authorized, that shoot, when we go into a theater. And the scratch tape is basically just a single camera that's set in the back of the theater. And we need approval from the unions before we even go in to do that. So it's a very simple shot of what's going on stage. So if, the more lead time we have from when we get that scratch tape to when the director has to actually shoot the show is better. But the directors that we use are, well, there's two different directors here. So you have the director of the stage version, and then you have the TV director. And the TV director, we hire people that love the stage. They're familiar with theater, they love it, and they've done these live productions before. So they're great at doing live switching is what it's called. So they basically look at the scratch tape. They decide, depending on how many people are on the cast, the size of the theater, the shape of the show, where those cameras are going to be and how many they have. I mean, that's also part of budgeting as well. So the layout of the cameras are all there. And as Stu said, we try to shoot as many shows as we can, but we just don't have, it doesn't make sense after a certain point to shoot, more than 2 shows or 3 shows. So we try to do a Wednesday matinee, a Wednesday evening, and then a Thursday show. So that if they're then in each one of those is shot and recorded, and it could actually go out all on its own, because these TV directors are that good that they can usually look at what, plan what they want in their shots and then do it. So those are, each individual one, it is almost flawless. But then the director looks at each of these finished, it's like a finished product, or, and then can choose from the other nights that they had, or the other video from cameras, the other like 12 cameras, to see if there was something in the shot that they really think, what, we should replace that, or I could have done something better there.
I relate to this from recording CDs. Going in, you do multiple takes, and then you take the best take from each of the lines, and
Yep.
And thank God there's auto tune too, but that's another story.
And again, that enhanced technology that we were talking about, the lighting is enhanced sometimes, but what the enhanced lighting is to your point, it makes it look on camera when you're viewing it on the screen, it's going to look the same as if you were in the theater. So that the enhanced lighting is to make the camera show what you would have been looking for. So it really doesn't change. It's not like, oh, it's dark and then suddenly we light everything up. It really is just to make the technology has improved so much that there isn't a lot of lighting enhancement that has to be done. But sometimes it's, corners of the stage that were supposed to be a little bit darker, but the camera where they're placed might not be able to, it's not going to translate in the same way.
So the live audience doesn't see any significant change in what they're watching.
Notice.
They won't notice.
No.
And
sometimes the lighting director is not really noticing any difference. Like, well, I shouldn't say that because the Broadway lighting directors, they notice when their lighting has been tweaked. So, but when it's on screen, it looks to them the way that it's supposed to look. And that having those multiple cameras to choose from, the lighting on a different night. So what we do at Broadway HD, because our level of quality for the finished product is so much higher, we are what we call color balancing, so that the cameras on one night and the camera from one light, from one perspective, the lighting on a person's costume is going to look different depending on which camera that you're looking at, because the light would be a little different. So that sort of color balancing. So if you're looking from one angle and the person's dress looks purple, and then you come over another side and it looks blue, it's jarring. So we do these things called the color balance. And the same thing with the sound is that, I think at this point, most people are familiar with, the band, you don't want it to be louder than the person that's singing, or the singing so that the mix of the audio, we are very carefully adjusting that so that it all comes across, again, what you would hear if you were in the theater. So those are the high level, high quality types of assurances that we make that the Broadway HD show that you're watching would be the same quality as if you were in the theater.
I'm gonna go back to an earlier question because it's something that I wanted to ask anyway. Equity versus SAG-AFTRA, which basically is the description of one of the biggest wars going on in theater. But just for the purpose of what you're doing, you're talking about working on SAG contracts when you do this, when you would come in and do a live capture?
The actors get both.
They get both.
They're getting both for Broadway.
So it'd be fair to say it's a little pricey.
Oh,
well, the priciness isn't in the cameras or in things like that. It really is in the rights, because you could go in with 3 cameras. I mean, the Lincoln Center, the Billy Rose, archives in Lincoln Center have sort of these 3 camera shoots that the color isn't balanced, the audio isn't balanced. They just do 3 cameras, they shoot 1 show, and then that's it. They have no rights to show it outside of the Lincoln Center Library. It's basically in a vault there. And they have the largest collection. So if you guys are in New York or you visit New York, I really encourage you to go over to the Lincoln Center Library for the Performing Arts, the Billy Rose curated, library over there, because they have thousands of the commercials, the, other marketing video that's there. They have a lot of print assets that are there, and they have the largest collection of video, but they don't have the rights to show it outside of that library. The unions did not allow for that. So when we do these authorized shoots, we tell everyone what it is that we want to do with it, which is we want it to stream on Broadway HD. So
I think the most expensive, the second most expensive cost is the rights. Everyone gets paid. Every actor, every understudy, every swing dancer, all get compensated. Even the wranglers for children, people who don't even get seen during the shoot that we have, are part of the expense on it. So yes, it is pricey.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's none of us in this room are probably going to go out and do this, but I think the understanding some of the basic principles will help us do what we can do better. So Owen or Jay, can you start going through the questions, because there's a ton of questions.
We've got a great question from Jean. Jean, would you like to come and ask your question?
Gene's question I'm seeing is, I would love to know how the value of a show is affected by it being available via live capture. So is there any cannibalism in the market from the live capture, or does it create more interest perhaps? It seems like a win for getting it seen by more people, but what about just the market saturation, mystique, live performance, ticket sales?
Okay.
What has been your experience?
So to start off with, to define what cannibalization is, and just to be on the same page.
Taking a part of your market segment away from you.
Yes, so cannibalization is the when you're trying to do a live show for Broadway and you're trying to sell a single ticket for $125 for a single ticket. The fear of cannibalization is that streaming Phantom of the Opera on Broadway HD is going to take away from the box office. So it's going to damage your box office. And again, there is no definitive proof that this is not the case. So for producers that are producing these $20 million musicals, they should be careful. They should look at all of this and say, is this really going to damage my box office? Are people not going to come and see my show if I put it up live, if I put it up to stream at any time? So yeah, it certainly is a concern. And that's what the fear is. We've been told over and over, oh, producers don't want you to shoot their show. And I say, that's not true. Everyone would love to do a 14 camera Broadway HD capture of their show. But what they're fearful of is the timing. So the timing and the distribution of it at the same time that they're trying to sell a ticket to a box, through the box office for $125. That's what they're fearful of. But right now with Broadway HD, we are a streaming service. We have 350 shows. Every single month we put up new shows. So we are a feed the beast system. We have to have new content coming up all the time. So we don't have the money to shoot all of the Broadway shows and hold it until all of the producers, all 35 of those producers above the title, are comfortable with us putting it online. There are ways around that. We wait sometimes until the show is over. We can geo-block things, but Stu and I advocate all the time that these shows should be shot. It should be part of the capitalization of a show. And to the person's question of what is, how is that additive? The shows that are done that have digital assets, which are cast recordings of the audio or digital captures, are much more likely to be licensed and done in subsequent markets to Broadway. So
yeah, I don't know where I read it, so this is going to be a little bit improvised here, but I know that I read very recently that there's been evidence that this says that this streaming, the availability of a show has actually increased interest in seeing the show itself.
Oh, certainly. When we did, we produced the original Legally Blonde on Broadway.
Oh, good. That's always my go-to. I always talk about Legally Blonde.
Well, exactly. So it was doing well at the Palace, and it played the Palace Theater. So it was,
you haven't mentioned it yet, but you talk about your relationship with the Palace Theater in one sentence.
Well, okay. Well, I've been partners with Niederlander in the Palace Theater for 45 years now, and we've been able to be the house of hits. A lot of Tony Award-winning shows like La Cage aux Folles, Will Rogers' Follies have come out of that theater. And then after renovations, a developer came and more recently wanted to actually elevate the theater 30 feet into the air to free up some retail space in the Times Square area. Landmarks was very careful with and worked with us to make sure that everything was copacetic. And certainly now we're going to have a beautifully decorated craftsmanship is still alive. Wait till you see this theater, the time and effort that everyone's putting into it, like a newborn. So it's going to be a recreation of the 1913 theater with a modern box office, an escalator, new bathrooms, better dressing rooms for the cast and crew. So we're very excited about this, and hopefully we'll have this all by spring of 2023.
But they actually raised some of the original structure, didn't they?
Oh, the entire 1,700 seat.
Yeah, there you go.
Was carefully elevated.
I swoon when I think about this. It's like crazy. It's amazing that you're doing that.
I guess it's
So
part of technology. So
so-
Legally Blonde was playing the Palace, and MTV wanted to shoot it while it was in our theater. And not only, and then they showed it on MTV. Of course, I don't know here who remembers MTV, but I do. And yeah, there you go. Okay, good. And it actually, not only did it increase ticket sales for the box office in New York, but it actually gave a brand awareness to the product. So when it went on the road, it did even better than it did in New York. It's a great marketing.
I'm glad you said that, because that's what I've been telling people for years.
Well, you know,
And if
you can see Cats on our website, and there's still a tour of Cats out there. You can see Les Mis on our website, and there's still a touring company of Les Mis out there. So, you know, it's not taking away tickets, it's keeping the product in front of the public's eye, really.
Okay. So Owen, let's catch up with a little bit, a few hundred more of the questions.
Oh,
Yeah, we have a question from Ken. Would you like to ask it, Ken?
Ken uses his mic.
Okay,
here,
so
right?
Ken asks, would Broadway HD ever consider doing a non-equity off-Broadway showcase or not?
Again, it's not about whether it's union or not. It's about the storytelling and the production values. We really don't look, that's not where we're looking, is off-Broadway non-union. We're just not. To say that we would never do it, you know, Mike Birbiglia, I believe, started off Broadway non-union. So, you know, and he ended up on HBO with that, and he's on Broadway twice. So, you know, never say never. But we're probably looking for something, but that one, again, it's a one-person show. So something that's a one-person show, I don't know that the production values are going to change that much if you take one person in an off-Broadway stage and then put that one person on Broadway. Are the production values going to be that much greater? But I think for the big musicals, for the, you know, bigger cast shows, it's just so hard in a non-union setting and in a smaller theater to really to do a show justice. And then, you know, the whole point
I also want to say that just another aspect of it is marketing. You have to anticipate whether you have an audience that's going to be interested in whatever you're putting onto your channel. You'd have to find a selling point if you're doing a non-equity showcase or a production, non-equity production. There'd have to be a selling point. So I mean, if there were a huge selling point, like
you know, if a TikTok star was doing something, you know what I mean? Somebody like a star, you know, as celebrity, I'll call them, you know,
Yeah.
Kardashians, I don't believe are equity. So, you know, if one of them wanted to do enough, you know, so.
and you would get viewership, you would get tremendous viewership from it.
Yeah, so I mean, there are exceptions to all of it, but that's really not what we're looking for. We really are looking at Broadway shows and Broadway caliber shows. That doesn't mean that there aren't it isn't great theater going on somewhere else. But I think that, you know, to the audience here, it's like, what are you looking to live stream your show for? And the rights that we were talking about with the stage rights, the streaming rights that it's a live stream, the streaming rights that you have you know, scheduled content that's later. So you live streamed it at one point and then you're holding it and then showing it a couple of other times. The video on demand, which is what Broadway HD is. We are an SVOD, which is subscription video on demand. And then there's remote performances and Zoom performances, which are, you know, the online editions of things, which people aren't necessarily on a stage. So all of those different rights are there. Union, you know, union and non-union. So I think that, you know, it depends on what the story is. And we actually did a show that was done off Broadway in New York, but it was done at COVID. No, it was the one that I'm referring to is Who's Your Bag Daddy? And it was done in Zoom Square. So I mean, if you guys are
is that available on your channel? Because I've been wanting to watch it.
It's brilliant, and it's brilliantly done in COVID, in these little COVID squares.
Palit. What's my friend's name?
Pardon?
What's his name? Palit. The writer.
If you hadn't asked me,
Marshall Palit, yes.
So that shows an example of something that was, but again, the script itself was terrific. The script itself was just kind of brilliant all on its own. So storytelling with the technology. So let's go with the what is theater, right? Theater is just storytelling. So it started around campfires, and then as there was technology came up, and as different ways to enhance the storytelling came along, so we moved from a campfire, then we moved inside, then we had candles, then we had lights and electricity, and then we had microphones, and each time another layer of technology sort of came into commercial theater, there was pushback. Stu will tell you, he's like, people, when we had microphones, it was like, what, microphones? What, this isn't real theater anymore. Now you look at the lighting and set design that we have, and it's seamless. You can't tell what's the lights from what's the projections on stage. So the streaming technology and bringing the theater is now the technology to distribute theater from within the theater to out. That is this last layer of technology that we're layering in. And the industry is still resistant to it because it's change, and nobody likes change. But with that understanding, I think you have to know what it is that, what's the reason that you're streaming? What's the reason why you're doing the show you're doing? What's the reason why you have the script that you have, that you're trying to move that forward? Is it because you want to star in it? Or is it because you wrote it and you think it's great for somebody else? Is it to make money? Is it to get yourself to Broadway? I mean, what is the reason why you need to add this layer of technology? Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't need to live stream. Maybe you just need to capture something. Maybe you just need permission and you're just trying to raise money. If you live stream something or you capture it and put it out there, is it really ready? Is this the time to share that with a wider audience? And then that's out there, and people think when they see something that's captured like that, a lot of time, well, that's the final product. So is that doing your script or your project justice, is to present it in a way that it's not quite ready yet? So what is the purpose of it? Because if it's to get to, it's developing it, then I think then great, but you might not need to live stream that. It might just be, the remote rights that you can do it in a Zoom square if you're just trying to share it with investors. So I think, you have to go back and ask yourself questions about, why do you think that you need this? Why this show? Why now? Why streaming?
So I basically went to the room. If you want to ask your own question, do a virtual hand raise. Otherwise, Owen, rather than taking the time to see if somebody has their mic on, just ask the questions so we can get through some of the questions.
Sure. Rob Hoffman wants to know, if possible, who are some of the TV directors that you use and how do you find them?
Well, it's interesting because it is a new art form. And there were a handful of some that were really good. One of the ones we were able to get hold of was Don Roy King, who directs the Saturday Night Live show. He's won like what, 8 Emmy Awards, and
I think it's 14.
14 Emmy Awards, and he really has a touch and a handle on live camera shoots. So he's been good. He's been helpful on several occasions. Lonnie Price, also, who, by the way, does stage direction and cinema. Does well. And then Matthew Diamond, who came in, he did our Cyrano de Bergerac, as well as the Mr. Saturday Night. So there were a handful out there that we could get that had the experience and the technology of both stage and the sensitivities of both stage and camera.
Mhm.
Does the show itself have a final approval on who you bring in? Or do you do that independently?
We
No,
try
no,
to have that. We don't guarantee it, but you don't want people that don't get along.
They want to share the vision. You have to,
Yeah.
As a follow-up to that question, are all of these directors, I presume they're all DGA. Is that
Yes.
accurate?
Yes.
of course.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, next question.
Great. We have a question from Eric Rothman. It's a two-parter, or I guess more than that, but it's a multi-parter. Who pays whom how much? Does the show pay you? Do you pay the producer? And then as a follow-up, how are you financed to start up? VC, yourselves, outside producers, or others?
Lots of questions.
Oh my goodness.
The man wants to see my tax returns. I know.
You'll see them when Trump sees them.
Yeah, so Broadway HD is entirely financed by Stewart and myself, because we could, and we were, you know, when we started up, we really wanted to see if there was a business here. So we started small, and we tried to be very deliberate with our marketing and our content, you know, acquisition dollars. So we built slowly, and as I said, we're going into our 8th year. So yeah, it is just us. So that's like the financials of that. As far as, you know, how much people get paid and what they get paid, as I said, we have right now over 350 different full-length stage plays and musicals on Broadway HD, and none of them came to us in exactly the same way. Some of them we actually were involved with the stage production, and so we had the inside track to be able to go in and ask if a capture was possible. Some we again had colleagues that were doing that they were doing the stage version, and then they wanted it captured, so they came to us. And some we actually somebody else did the capture and we licensed it from them. So there's all different ways, but the sort of the short answer is with who gets paid with these, as we said, all of the shows that we have on Broadway HD are authorized live or digital captures or film shows, and the fees are royalties, or salaries, if you will, are all based off of, because it's, you know, the line items for a Broadway show is like, there's hundreds of them, but it's based off of the original fees that they were getting in their contracts that were for the stage version. And that's true also of the off-Broadway version. So it's sort of based off of, because even with actors, you know, some of them, the one lighting designer on one show isn't getting paid the same as a lighting designer on another show necessarily. So that's why there's differences there. So there really isn't one size fits all, but there's sort of the percentage of what they get is sort of, that's where the union comes in and unifies it, if you will.
Next question. Owen?
Yes, Arlene, would you like to, I see your hands up. Can you ask that yourself?
Yes, I wanted to bring up the topic of captioning. Just any words of wisdom that you have in your experience. And aside from that, I mean, you're promoting it or marketing it to people who need the captioning. And one question I have personally, could you consider having the captions so that you could move it around the screen? Because like right now, I put the captions right over your face because I don't want to move my eyes around. And most people who use captioning really do that. You know, they like to put it up where they can. So that's a two-part question. So,
okay, well, Arlene, I do remember you from years ago. You reached
Yes.
out to say that you loved Broadway HD, but why did we not have any sort of you know, captioning? And with the internet, when we started, you know, building our website about 10 years ago, and then as I said, we launched, you know, 7 years ago, last month or 2 months ago, there was no requirements at that time that things do have that option. But so we didn't think about it, because like, okay, you know, you just like, let's put this up, let's go this way. But it wasn't until you reached out, and then there was other subsequent people that reached out and said, hey, we're watching your shows, but we have some sort of, you know, impairment here that would help if you had captions. And I said, you know what, that makes perfect sense. So we were able to then start, and for us, it's a cost. So we are at, you know, with each show that we get now, we put it into what it is that's required. So we're trying to layer in and then go back and then make sure that the shows that we did have are all captioned. From that became the, you know, the concept, and what we're trying to implement now with most of our shows is with audio descriptive. So people that have any sort of hearing disability can read what it is, but people that have sight limitations or are blind can actually hear the audio descriptive. So I don't know if everybody knows what audio descriptive is, but it would be like, well, this woman, Bonnie Comley, is sitting there and she has blonde hair and she's doing hand gestures as she
Right.
speaks. And so the layers of technology are coming in to make us more accessible, because that's what Broadway HD is all about, is accessibility for people that either can't get there, have limitations with things, whether that's mobility or sight or hearing. We're trying to be there. We're trying to build, and what Broadway HD is doing with that is making theater accessible to people that didn't necessarily know it was even there before. So the geography is not a problem, because we'll bring the show to you. The cost is much more, for all 350 of our shows, the subscription annually is $130, which a Broadway ticket is $125 for one single ticket. So we're bringing down the cost, the geography, and then any other sort of limitations that we're trying to, bring those layers of technology in and make things more accessible. So we're for people that can't get to the theater, but we're also for people that do go to the theater. It's a way for them to interact with this art form that they love 24/7. You don't have to wait for an 8 o'clock curtain. You can watch something like a Mr. Saturday Night that you missed on Broadway. Now you can watch it at your leisure on demand, and that's absolutely the convenience of streaming on demand technology.
In fact, that's our motto. If you can't get to Broadway, get to Broadway HD.
There you go.
Yeah.
Someday I'll make it to
I
Broadway.
I just mentioned getting your promotion to the audience. I don't see any signs of that in the population that I'm interacting with. So if you just want to follow up, yeah.
Yeah, we're BroadwayHD.com. So Broadway and then HD for high definition.com, and you can get to us there. And we actually have a holiday discount. I think it's through next week. So if you go to the sign up, if you go to
No, I've been there. I'm just saying you promoting to across the world, essentially.
I'm sorry, promoting where?
Building your audience from people who need the captioning, who need the audio description. I just just curious if you've reached out specifically for that audience.
We are trying all the time. So yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
We're trying to reach people that go to the theater all the time also. So
Well,
we're always
Arlene could be a
spread the word.
conduit for you to her community if that would be of any help. I want to keep moving though, because
Absolutely.
as kind of a side kind of an answer to Lee Roscoe, you gave us discounts on Tuesday night at the
Yes.
town hall. Is there a way that people can get discounted annual subscription to Broadway HD?
Yeah, if you just go
Yeah,
to
right
Broadway,
now. Yeah. No, go ahead.
go to
I mean,
if you go to BroadwayHD.com, and then where it says sign up, you can go to the sign up, and the top bar, it says holiday offer. So if you click on that, it will drop down and give you the discount that's going on for now.
Okay, and what is that discount? What does it cost per year?
it's
for people?
$30 off the annual price, but only good till like December 7th. So do it now.
Everybody go to BroadwayHD.com now. Owen, am I missing anyone else? I kept seeing lots of questions. I see
I
one from
apologize if I
Tracy.
missed anyone. I don't think that I've seen
No,
any.
you missed Tracy Swedlow.
Did I?
Tracy!
Do you monetize the captures by licensing them out to third-party streamers, HBO, Netflix, Amazon, or do the producers pay you and then can control the rights?
So again, we have 350 different shows. So the answer to that, it depends on
Yes
which
and yes.
But the short answer is yes, we do. So when Broadway HD does a digital capture and we own the copyright, basically, so that's sort of our show, then we can then license it out for education, which we do, which means like everybody that has a nyu.edu, if the NYU librarian sign, like we have signs up for the offer that we have, then they can get, their students access to not the entire catalog, but certain educational titles that we've sort of everybody's agreed on and picked out. So it goes to educational. We also have distribution partners in Asia and Japan, and we've also done in cinema events. But again, those are all different rights. So you have to make sure, but what we're doing is it's like an indie movie and you're trying to monetize it in and maximize the revenue that comes back in each individual distribution window and each geography zone that you can license in.
Gloria, did you want to ask your question? Gloria Rosen.
Yes, I'm unmuting and starting. Hi, thanks. Just very quickly, after you, some of the shows have interpreters built in, so you see both the interpreter and the show, but sometimes the show does not have that, and there is an interpreter added afterwards. And I was wondering if you had dealt with that at all.
We haven't. The times that we do the captures, we are not, we do that. We try to, bring down the barrier of any sort of hearing impairment with the subtitles, with the captions on it. So we haven't actually done sign language interpreters at the same time that we're doing the show. I think the logistics of it, it's hard enough doing what we're doing when we try to capture the entire cast on stage. So to add another performer, if you will, interpreter, it adds another layer of complexity. I mean, maybe there's some way with the technology we could put that person in a little box down below, but then is that really going to be the right size box?
Right, I know that is
to be able to see. So we haven't as yet, not to say that we never would. We've actually looked at productions that are with deaf actors that someone else is signing on stage next to them, similar to the Spring Awakening that was done,
Right.
the revival of Spring Awakening. So we've looked at that, but for whatever reason, the show wasn't.
There's two different areas. One, people who are hard of hearing later in life, and they read and they like the captions. Deaf from birth. Some of them really don't like to read. They just want the interpreter because that's a whole different language. So, and I didn't know if you could insert that. I know this is really complicated. After the show is already filmed, can the interpreter be put in after that?
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because again, that's not my specialty. So my ignorance is showing again with that. So I apologize.
There's no reason you should even know such a thing.
But once you explained it, it was obvious. So, I mean, it's things like that, we are a streaming entertainment company. We're trying to serve everybody. But let's face it, not everybody goes to the theater. I talk about what the population of the United States is. There's 350 million of us here. Pre-COVID, 75% of our 350 million people would go into a movie theater and see a movie at least once, to go to the movies, if you will. But of our 350 million in the United States, only 15% would buy a ticket and go see a live theater production. So
Right.
There's 85% of our whole country that's just not theater going population. So we're trying to we are a niche entertainment because of that, because there's only 15% of our population that goes. At Broadway HD, we're trying to expand that, and we have actually. We are now seeing that younger people are going. Other people that didn't go to the theater in the pandemic have sort of discovered this as an art form because they were just out there sort of looking around. So there's always things to be learned, and there's always ways to, reach audiences that we didn't reach before. But that's what we're doing, is we're trying to serve the people that do love theater and find audiences that it was inaccessible to before. And, we're doing that, slowly but surely. So I love your suggestion that we add sign language interpretation in not just captions. So I appreciate that suggestion.
An additional function that people could opt into, probably.
Yeah.
And it's the layering in the technology that is really expensive. And not that it's not worth it. But again, it's, we're trying to do these things as we layer it in and
Understood. I just thought I'd throw it out there and let it.
I appreciate that suggestion,
Yeah.
because again, it never occurred to me until you said it. So Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm good. It's now 6:45. I've kept you nice people 15 minutes longer than I originally invited you for, which is, thank you so much for giving us extra time. It's been a very generous sharing. Your reviews in the chat include saying how cute you both are. Just
Thank you very much.
but it's been very generous, and you've also had a very good sense of the room, and you've, I think, explained things in ways that the room has been able to really assimilate them. So we thank you for that as well. And I'm going to just, again, Bonnie and Stewart, thank you for being friends, and thank you for being here today. Very grateful to you. Love Broadway HD. Now that we finally heard the dog.
There's the
Yeah,
dog.
sorry.
Yeah, there he is.
Thank you,
Um,
Bob. It's been great.
So
Thank you, everyone.
I'm going to say some closing words to my virtual audiences. And if you can stay, I think people would love to meet you. And if not, that's okay. But I'll leave it up to you. And I'm going to go back to the land of speaker. And thank everybody for being with us today. And thank you, audiences out there. As I said at the beginning, if you want to be in the room, then have a chance to ask your questions and actually meet some terrific people in the community. Email me at trunltd@aol.com. That's trunltd@aol.com. And if you want to support us, or if you want to give an end of year tax deductible donation, because we're a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, go to trudonate.com, trudonate.com. And be with us again soon, I hope. Thank you, everyone.